Right. So, wow, on the theme of tender, this is certainly the right theme for this time of year. I've just been out in the yard and noticing just the leaves coming out of their buds, and the color of the green. That soft, pale spring green as the leaves come out and the color comes back into them. There's just something that moves me about that, and something that responds with its own tenderness to the tenderness I perceive in the world that's full of all these new things. Even though the leaves are tender, they're kind of also very resilient, very tough. Many of the leaves that come out at this time of the year, I think almost all of them, of plants that are already leafing out, can handle a little frost. They can handle a lot of wind we've been getting. So, taking inspiration in that. I wanted to talk tonight about speech, tenderness related to speech. But I found as I was thinking about it, the first thing my mind went to in terms of communication, if you don't just limit it to speech, is touch, the power of touch to communicate, particularly when we're talking about tenderness. In some ways, it's the original communication. It's certainly one my dog understands, certainly something that an infant understands. And I think in all of us, no matter our age, it just kind of goes right past a lot of our ideas and conceptualizations. It just ties right into our most basic nervous system and speaks to it. And so, sometimes when I talk about how to accompany yourself, especially during difficult things, I sometimes give the image of putting a hand on the shoulder of a part of you that's having a hard time, an internal hand, an imaginative hand. And what that does often is it kind of softens the heart. And you could actually feel a palpable sense of being accompanied in that. In some funny way, we think of ourselves as just one being. We're actually a multiplicity of beings. We're a multiplicity of energies inside, and we can certainly accompany ourselves. We can do a kind of tandem thing, even within ourselves. So, and perhaps even more powerfully, when someone else touches us, and touches us with tenderness, it has a profound effect. It seems to communicate well-being and ease and safety and connection. All those things are communicated in touch. And, you might even notice the quality of touch that you use through the day, not just with people, with anything you touch. You kind of grab it, is it completely not a conscious thing at all? You can relate to everything through a tender touch, through a sensitive touch. Not necessarily by tender, I don't necessarily mean weak. I mean something that's really present in the touch and present in a kind way. So when we think about speaking, think about tenderness in speech, tone is all important, I think. Those of you who have kind of been on the Buddhist path for a while will be familiar with the the fourth precept about right speech. Though I prefer translating the Pali there as attuned speech, not right speech. Samma word that's being translated as right, it has a musical root to it. So I think that attunement is actually the right thing. Say right speech kind of keys us into that part of the brain that like wants to do it right, something more rigid. Whereas attunement is about resonance, it's about sensitivity, it's about reciprocity. And so in the teaching about right speech or attuned speech, one of the parts of it is to speak gently rather than harshly. And because of that, you can begin to sensitize yourself to the tone with which you speak. I mean, you can always kind of modulate your tone artificially, make yourself sound like something you don't feel. But what I actually find is so powerful about noticing tone is that in trying to find a tone, if you have something to say and you want to say it gently, in a way that can be heard by another person, in a way that's not going to alarm them, not going to make them defensive. In order to find that tone, you actually have to change your state. You actually have to find the state inside that can speak in that tone. I found, if I try to fake it, the tone that I have actually conveys the real feeling I have. And so the harsh emotions of, anger, fear to some degree, though fear can be something that can melt the heart, but fear is often what propels us to anger, or contempt, which is probably the one that is gonna, bring the most kind of reaction out of people. Contempt provokes shame in people. So all of those sorts of things, they have the potential to harm those tones. And so in order to find the tone that kindness requires, you have to kind of shift through inside to find the right state. That's what I love about paying attention to tone. And yet it's so easy to have things come out in a harsh way, not necessarily in a hugely harsh way, but just, saying something a little too blunt, a little too sharp, because we aren't mindful of our tone and we aren't mindful of our state. So it's a powerful thing. And I think that, tone, it's like it's hardwired into human beings, how to speak, what the tone of our speech means. I think you can probably go anywhere in the world and people can tell the difference between a kind tone and a mean tone. It transcends culture and syntax, such a basic part of us. And certainly our animals in our lives can hear the tone. Perhaps that's all they hear, apart from them, maybe a couple dozen words that a dog might know, and who knows how many a cat knows, probably similar, where they're actually getting the cognitive meaning from the word, listening to the tone. They're listening to the pitch. They're listening to your state. They're attuned to your state. Your animals are attuned to your state. And we human beings, I think, if we live close to the body, we live close to the breath and to the moment, then we too start to attune to the states of the beings around us. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing that we're attuned in that way to each other. Not necessarily that we have to share the state of who's ever around us. We don't have to become upset when they're upset or worried when they're worried. But there's a way that we can kind of let our sensors be open, sensors, with a sense of individuation, a sense of we don't have to feel what the other person is feeling. We don't have to let that be our feeling too, but we can nonetheless kind of take it in, feel it. So tone, and so one of the ways I was trying to talk about tone was to speak from the heart. When you're speaking from the heart, there's a certain tone you have when you're speaking from your head, kind of factual. And so you can actually think about speaking from your heart. But if your heart is kind of hard and shut off, that can come through too. So again, you can use tone as a way into being able to speak from the heart. And then there's a kind of the question of the content of what we say, tenderness in the content. So when I was thinking about this, I thought, there's not only speaking from the heart, there's speaking for the heart. So it's often the case in communication that we want another person to know what's inside of us. And that means letting them know what matters. Along the lines of our little mantra, your heart matters. If it matters, then it's also important to speak for it, to let the people around you know what matters to you. In all sorts of different ways. That it matters to you that they did something for you, that it matters to you even that they didn't notice you. Again, you'll have to find the right tone to communicate that in the right moment. But sometimes it's important that you communicate what's in your heart that way. I was at town meeting last night. Goodness, town meeting. What a tradition. Some of you live in towns that are big enough to no longer have it. But I always admire the people who stand up with a microphone and talk to the whole group, and often saying something controversial. But as I listened, I could hear people saying what mattered to them, what was important, even as they were making sort of arguments of a cognitive nature, appealing to people's reason. There's a way that, in that communication, you really get the sense of the person. People stand up at the mic with their full personality, and it comes through, and for better or worse, and you kind of get the feel of them. So that was part of my reflection too. Is if there are the arguments we give for things, the rationales. But when people really hear from your heart what matters, when you speak for your heart, I think it really has an impact on people. People can hear it. And if you can speak for your heart with a tone that allows people in, it's just so much more powerful. I've certainly heard people speak from the heart with a certain amount of harshness and fear and defensiveness and, kind of, drawing their sword. But I think the thing that, the thing about attunement is that people match your state. You do this automatically. Someone comes at you with anger, you immediately have, your defenses come up very quickly. Feel like you have to defend yourself in some way. It takes a great deal of maturity to let somebody be angry at you and not get defensive, not close off, not protect. Just stay soft and receptive. It takes a lot of maturity to do that. And consciousness, because our instincts are to match someone's energy. And so if someone lets their heart be soft when they speak, it invites other people's hearts to soften. And it invites the words to go in where the heart is soft and to be, it invites attunement. In some ways, we're more powerful than we know we are with our speech. And the power that we have, it doesn't lie in our ability to intimidate people or browbeat them or argue them down or even have a long list of rationale to convince them, as much as it lies in that quality of letting someone else resonate with you, which really requires softness. It requires openness. It requires, that you let people in. And I might back up a little and say it doesn't necessarily even always require softness in terms of a tone. You can certainly speak with a great deal of force if you're coming from your heart. Something that you're impassioned about, something that matters. What I'm more actually talking about is the way that you can let what matters resonate in your voice. I even think there are moments when you speak in anger, when that what matters resonates so fiercely, so strongly, that people can take it in without pushing it away, without getting defensive, without arguing back. I've seen people be able to do that kind of fierceness that it disarms people. And it often they're speaking from such a human place when in their anger about what matters to them and what matters that happens to other people or what has happened to them. So all of it, there's so much we can do with our speech in terms of having power in the world, the right kind of power, the power to connect, the power to join, the power to have our needs heard and met. It very much lies in that power of speech and honing it and attuning yourself through it. All right.